Welcome to the Net Wealth Nest Podcast, the show that helps everyday people build real financial stability, starting from wherever you are. Whether you're working your way out of debt or just starting to save, we're here to help you grow your net wealth to your first big wealth milestone. Each episode, we break down the mindset shifts, practical tools, real-life actions that can transform your financial future. Thanks for tuning in. Now let's get to work building your net wealth nest. Welcome to Net Wealth Nest Podcast. I'm your host, Jim LaBeouf, and today we're going to talk about the age-old question, do I buy my home or do I rent? And what are the pros and cons of each? Many people ask this question, and everybody seems to have a specific yay or nay to this, but I'm here to tell you, it just depends. It depends on your personal situation, so we'll take a few minutes here today. We'll run through some pros and cons of buying and pros and cons of renting. And then we'll talk maybe about some situational things that might help you decide which is going to be better for you. So let's talk about buying. We'll talk about the benefits of buying. First and foremost, buying means you own it, at least somewhat, with the bank probably having a loan. You own a piece of real estate that has the opportunity to help you grow your wealth. And you know that at Net Wealth Nest, we are all about growing your wealth. So buying a home can help you get there. You are using leverage. So unlike other ways to grow your wealth, let's take stocks as an example. If you want to buy a certain amount of stocks, you are putting up all that capital, and that's how you're receiving it. So let's say you want to buy one share of Apple stock, and right now in early 2025, I believe Apple stock is right around $220 or $230. So let's say it's $230. If you want to buy one share of Apple stock, you need to put up all $230. Housing, when you use a loan, works a little bit differently where you can use the bank's money. So maybe you put 5% down, maybe you put 20% down. But let's say you want to buy a house for $200,000. You're going to buy a home and you're going to put 20% down. It means you're going to put 40 grand down, and the other $160,000 plus the costs of doing the loan and all of that, a little bit more than the 160 probably at the end of the day, is going to be financed by the bank. Now, you technically own the home. You are on the deed and the title, but the bank has put up most of the money to purchase that home. Same with if you put 5% down, same concept, except you're only putting down, in this case, it would be $10,000 to get into that $200,000 home. Next, you get to do what you want in the house. So when you talk about upgrades, painting, all of those types of things, some places where you live, they might not allow you to do different things, like even paint. Some places, some apartments, you can't paint the walls the color you want or any of that stuff, or they have specific rules. Some places don't allow pets. Those types of things. You can do what you want in your house, provided it's legal, and provided that if you live in an area that has an HOA, it is approved by your HOA area. You also have the opportunity to gain appreciation. That house should over time, and historically has over time, grown in its worth. So if you buy a $200,000 house in 10 years, it could be worth maybe $250. Depending on the market, it could be worth $300. If you do some upgrades to it, it could be worth more than that. Just depends. But typically, you are growing that asset value over time. And then it's typically more private. Usually when you buy a house, it depends on what kind of house you buy. If you buy a single family house, if you buy something like that, it's usually more private. Now, that's not always the case if you buy a townhome or a condo, but even in those situations, they're typically a little bit more private. There's less shared common places, which some people like. People like their privacy. So those are just some of the benefits of buying a home. Let's talk about a few cons. So right now, it is expensive to buy a home. Home prices have shot up. Interest rates are higher than we've seen in probably a decade or more. And that has made everything much more expensive to buy a house, which makes it harder for individuals to get into them because they need to have more money down to afford it. Or sometimes they just can't afford what they could even a few years ago when interest rates are really low. They could afford maybe a $200,000 or $250,000 house. And now that same house, because of the rate that interest rates have jumped up to somewhere between 6 and 7%, they can't afford it. And so that's one of the things, is it's just more expensive to get into a home right now. You have repairs and potentially large expenses. So when you're buying a home and your furnace goes out or your water heater goes out or there's a hole in your roof or your roof is just at the end of its life and needs to be replaced, you are taking care of all those things. You are footing those bills, and hopefully you have the means to do that and you're not taking out additional debt or putting in even worse, putting on credit cards. But you need to budget in for those expenses, and you know that they're going to come around. You are doing the upkeep and maintenance on the home you own. Because of the cost, because of the maintenance, because of the market, at least right now, again, beginning 2025, you're probably locked into that without having to lose money for at least 5 years. That's the 5 to 7 year mark is where, assuming you put down, let's say 5%. Now, if you put down more, you're in a better position, but you still could lose money based on what you put down. But if you put down 5% and you go to sell that house a year later, with typical realtor fees and other fees for loans and all of that, and what you might have to accommodate for the buyers that are looking to buy your house, you could very easily walk away with having to put money in to get that deal closed. Whereas once you get past the 5 to 7 year mark, you typically have enough space between what you paid for the house and what the house is now worth, as well as what you've paid down on the house by making your mortgage payments, that you can at least walk away with a little bit of money in your pocket. And then the last piece on here, and we touched about it, you do have to have a decent amount of money to be able to put down, depending on the house cost. So again, we use the $200,000 starter home as an example. Even at 5% down, you still need 10 grand to be able to put 5% down. And that doesn't even include any closing costs you might have on top of that. So there are potentially $3, $4, $5 more $1,000. And again, sometimes you can negotiate where the sellers will cover those costs, but not always. And again, it is a significant chunk of money that you need to have available to you more often than not to buy that home. So there's pros and cons of buying. And again, the key and why most people like to buy is that it's a way to grow your wealth over the long term. It's a stable position that you're putting yourself or your family in as well when you buy a home. Let's talk about renting, the flip side of that. So benefits of renting. There's typically no major repair costs, first and foremost. Water heater goes out if you're renting a home or in an apartment. The heat, the roof, any of those major, even the sink is leaking now or the toilet's not flushing properly. Those are all costs that are picked up by the landlord that owns the home. And so that's a great way to save money and not have to have that extra expenditure. You have flexibility with mobility. If you need to move, if you need to go somewhere else. Typically, most people are signing at max a 1-year lease. And when they sign that lease, they're there for a year. And they can either renew that lease, assuming that they're a good tenant, or they can leave and go somewhere else, or maybe a new job. It's also easier to potentially break a lease early by buying out of it versus a home where you need to sell it. So let's say you're living somewhere for 6 months and your job is asking you to move somewhere. A great opportunity comes up, or a new job comes up, whatever it might be. Let's just say you need to move to a different state as an example. You can typically talk to your landlord and say, hey, I need to break my lease. I'm moving out. Sometimes they'll let you sublease it, which means you find a tenant to live in there and pay for the remainder of your lease. Or sometimes they'll say, you know what, if you pay me the next 2 months, I will break your lease, cancel the rest of the lease, the other 4 months, and you'll be free and clear. And that gives me at least 2 months to find a new tenant. So it just depends on what the stipulations are of the landlord or the company that you're renting from. Depending on your place, you might not have to do any lawn care or snow removal. Most apartments, condos typically will have a company that comes in and does all that for you. It's part of their fees that they build into the rent. And so that's a really nice thing to have. That being said, sometimes when you rent a single family home, they're going to require that you do the lawn care, do the snow removal, all of that. So that is also, when you go to the con, it might be an extra expense you might not have thought of, where if you're looking to rent a single family home and they expect you to take care of the lawn and the driveway and the sidewalks for snow, if you live in a cold climate, you'll need a lawnmower and a snowblower to make that happen. More often than not, right now, at least in the environment we're in, renting is less expensive than buying a house. While you can find houses that are cheap, they might not be in the greatest condition, but typically even your starter homes are more expensive than finding an apartment to rent with potentially the same bedrooms. The key is you're obviously sharing an area with other people. And then the last kind of benefits of renting is there's minimal money to get in place. Typically, you're going to be asked for a deposit when you go to fill out a rent application and you're approved to rent that apartment or home or condo or whatever it might be. But that's typically 1 or 2 months rent. So even if you're paying $1,500, you're talking $3,000 in a deposit for your rental versus maybe the $10,000 it would cost to get into a $200,000 home. So you don't have to have as much liquid cash on you to do that. And the nice thing about the deposit is most of the time you can get most of that money back, provided that you really take care of the place you're living in. It's pretty much spotless. When you end up leaving, you can get a lot of that deposit back. And then last but not least, we'll flip over to a few of the cons of renting. So the first con is you're not building any wealth. And that's self-explanatory, right? You're paying somebody who owns that property, who is using that property to probably build their wealth. And you're doing that to take advantage of all those benefits that we just talked about with renting. You're also potentially living with many people in closer quarters. So if you live in an apartment, you could be, maybe you're in a fourplex and there's just 4 other tenants in there, or maybe you're in a much larger building where there's 25 or 30 tenants that live in there. Maybe you live in a big apartment complex that has multiple buildings and hundreds of tenants. It just depends on where you are in the country and what that situation is of that particular property. But you could have to deal with a lot of different people in a small area. And that leads us to shared spaces. Sometimes you're sharing lawns with them, or laundry, or other common areas that you might be interested in using, a pool in some examples. You might have to share that with other individuals. Sometimes you're not able to change everything you want to change. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but some places don't allow you to paint, or don't allow you to maybe hook up a satellite dish because it requires drilling into the building, or some places still don't allow pets. And so that could be something where you're not able to do any of that. And then lastly, while not the case right now, renting typically has a history of being more expensive than buying a place. And again, you give up some of the flexibility when you buy. So is that worth the extra money? And as an example, again, not necessarily the case right now. It's a little bit weird with how the market is, but in the past, most investors, even single family, they would go and buy a single family home. Maybe they had to fix it up or do whatever, but they were all in to that property and getting rent and all their taxes and insurance and everything covered by the amount of the rent payment. So their mortgage was completely covered, taxes, insurance, repairs. A good investor budgets all that in and then charges market rent. And so typically the rentee is paying more than it would have cost to buy that property. Now, the key is, again, maybe they need the flexibility. Maybe they don't have the credit score to go out and buy a property. Maybe they don't have the disposable income to do that, or can't afford the expenses of maintaining a property. All those things come into play. But that is one of the typically historical cons of renting, is it's historically more expensive than owning. So hopefully that clears up a little bit of whether buying or renting is better. Now, again, this is the thing I love about personal finance. It is personal by person. Everybody's situation is a little bit different. And even if you have a very similar situation to somebody else, the way you view things, or the way you think about things, or what makes you comfortable or sleep better at night might be different than that person. Take into account a few things. When you're looking to buy, you should be looking to set your roots down for at least 5 years. Really, 7 to 10 is the sweet spot, and maybe even longer. If you think you're going to stay in a place for 20 or 30 years, that's where you can build some significant wealth with buying a property. If you plan on moving around a lot, or do not want to take care of lawn or maintenance or any of that, that's where renting is going to come in. And you might end up paying a premium for that, but it does relieve some of the stress and anxiety around having to take care of a property or worrying about when things break. And last but not least, just because you rent doesn't mean you can't build wealth in real estate by buying rental properties, doesn't mean you can't build wealth by buying stocks and all of those other wealth vehicles. It just means that you might not own the place that you're living. And surprisingly enough, many people do that because they want the flexibility of being able to move around or do whatever they want, or go take the next opportunity. So it really is just going to boil down to what you want to do and what's best for you, and to weigh those pros and cons and weigh the monetary decision that you need to make, and then go after it. Hopefully that, again, clears up some of the common misconceptions and some of the differences, and help you make a better decision on what your end goals might be. If you are finding benefit in this information that I'm sharing with you, please subscribe to our podcast, or go on YouTube and subscribe to our channel. It's just Net Wealth Nest Podcast. We are on all your favorite podcast sources, Apple Podcast and Spotify and all of those. Or go on YouTube and subscribe to our channel, Net Wealth Nest, so you can get this information. Again, we're here to help you grow your wealth. It is my belief that we can help tens of thousands of people grow their foundational wealth and really put them in a position to be stable and secure in their financial lives. So thank you again. My name's Jim LeBeff, and I hope you are on your path to building your net wealth nest. Net Wealth Nest LLC and Podcast is an educational platform committed to providing resources and information to empower individuals on their financial journey. Please note, we do not provide financial, tax, or investment advice. All financial decisions should be made in consultation with a qualified professional who understands your unique circumstances. Seeking personalized advice is a smart and necessary step before making any major financial commitments. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you found value in this episode, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Net Wealth Nest, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. We read every comment, and they help us improve and guide what topics we dive into next. And hey, if something you heard today resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend, a family member, a coworker, your barber, your barista, even a stranger in line. You never know who might need this message. Remember, building net wealth is a journey, but you don't have to do it alone. Stick with us, and together, let's grow your net wealth nest.